The next mentor text that we have is Girl Interrupted by Susanna Kaysen, and this is about her time in a mental institution in the 60s. So it starts out with a case record, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. And then we're going to look at the second chapter, The Taxi. "You have a pimple," said the doctor. "I'd hoped nobody would notice. You've been picking it," he went on. When I'd woken that morning early so as to get to this appointment, the pimple had reached the stage of hard expectancy in which it begs to be picked. It was yearning for release. Freeing it from its little white dome, pressing until the blood ran, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I'd done all that could be done for the pimple. "You've been picking at yourself," the doctor said. I nodded. He was going to keep talking about it until I agreed with him, so I nodded. "Have a boyfriend?" he asked. I nodded to this too. "Trouble with the boyfriend?" It wasn't a question, actually. He was already nodding for me. "Pick at yourself," he repeated. He popped out from behind the desk and lunged toward me. He was a taut, fat man, tight-bellied and dark. "You need a rest," he announced. I did need a rest, particularly since I'd gotten up so early that morning in order to see this doctor, who lived out in the suburbs. I've changed trains twice, and I would have to retrace my steps to get to my job. Just thinking of it made me tired. "Don't you think," he was still standing in front of me, "don't you think you need a rest?" "Yes," I said. He strode off to the adjacent room where I could hear him talking on the phone. I have thought often of the next 10 minutes, my last 10 minutes. I had the impulse once to get up and leave through the door I'd entered, to walk the several blocks to the trolley stop and wait for the train that would take me back to my troublesome boyfriend, my job at the kitchen store. But I was too tired. He strutted back into the room, busy, pleased with himself. "I've got a bed for you," he said. "It'll be a rest, just for a couple of weeks, okay?" He sounded conciliatory, or pleading, and I was afraid. "I'll go Friday," I said. It was Tuesday. Maybe by Friday I wouldn't want to go. He bore down on me with his belly. "No, you go now." I thought this was unreasonable. "I have a lunch date," I said. "Forget it," he said. "You aren't going to lunch. You're going to the hospital." He looked triumphant. It was very quiet out in the suburbs before 8 in the morning, and neither of us had anything more to say. I heard the taxi pulling up in the doctor's driveway. And then, after this chapter, we have another document here, this being her appointment with the doctor. Now, the two things that I want us to practice after looking at this are the use of dialogue. Most of this chapter is dialogue. We have him saying something, her reacting to it, her saying something, and it just goes back and forth in this manner, with her putting bits of inner dialogue or stuff to fill us in as she goes through, but primarily it is just a conversation between two people. So that's the first thing that you're going to practice. The other thing is, when we actually do our personal narrative, you might consider using pictures, scraps, things that represent your memories, making it more of a multi-genre idea where you have these pieces that help us to better understand your personal narrative. So get your paper out and we can get started.